So good morning, and I'm so pleased to be able to be here. What an exciting workshop and conference. So I'm going to just give a 10-minute overview of the Big Data Hub program and tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the Midwest and how we fit with this workshop and the activities going on in the food, energy, water space and the ag-food system. Okay, so the Big Data Hubs are a U.S. government initiative under the larger Big Data initiative that was rolled out in 2012, in which a number of U.S. federal agencies came together to mobilize some funds to support new programs in big data R&D through their extramural funding and internal research activities. And in 2014, the National Science Foundation hosted regional meetings to begin to engage the NSF community, as well as corporate partners, industry partners, and state and local governments around what it would mean to have some kind of regional-facing organization to facilitate big data science. And then they issued a call for proposals, and in 2015, each hub got about $1.5 million to launch. So we have startup funds for a 3-year time frame to begin to do work across the region to build connectivity, add data science and big data capacity in our regions. And we're doing that in a number of ways, which I'll talk about. But in addition to the startup funds from NSF, we're beginning to put in place sort of partnership arrangements where we would start to get some funding for specific activities we're managing, and also we're developing value propositions for our stakeholder communities in order to sustain operations. So we're putting business plans together. We're expected to become self-sustaining at some point in a few years out, and we're now in the point of also doing stakeholder engagement to understand what kinds of services should we be focused on in each of our regions, and each are a little different. I'll also add that NSF has a second program called the Spokes Program, and they provided last year about $1 million or so for spoke projects across the 4 regions, and I'll tell you about ours in a minute. So here's our region in the Midwest. We have 12 states, and we border, of course, a couple of the provinces in Canada. And you'll see why that's important in a minute when we start talking about the thematic areas that and vertical sectors we engage with. But we start in Ohio and Michigan, and you can see, so I'm going to use my finger also. There we go. So Ohio, Michigan, across to North Dakota, down to Kansas and back around. So important states for a number of the vertical sectors. And so what do we do exactly? Well, all 4 of the hubs have a mission that is very aligned. We build and strengthen public-private partnerships to address societal grand challenges, both in science and for social issues, so policy, for example. We hope to spur economic development and then foster the data ecosystem. And we mean that across the entire data lifecycle, both for public, private, and gray data, those data that are not able to be fully open. And that's a really important space that we're engaged in as well. So data, for example, that either have privacy issues or proprietary IP-related issues. But we are interested in that space because there's an awful lot of science and decision-making services that can happen if we can figure out ways to share those data better amongst academic, industry, and government partners. Okay. So in the Midwest, we are seated across a number of verticals, and we are now beginning to think about how these actually several areas actually fit together under a couple different themes. And so the places that we are spending our time over the next couple of years will be linking urban science and smart cities with community resilience and with community-driven health and local energy management. And so we've got a program now that we're beginning to spin up called Data-Enabled Community Resilience. So that's happening. We'll have a small invited kickoff meeting for that and a big workshop next spring in that space. We've got some grants in some of these other areas, and I'll talk about them in a moment. What you can't see here, this one says transportation mobility, and this one says network sciences. The other space that we're working to bring together is ag and food. Now, we have funding in agriculture, and I'll tell you about that momentarily. But we have an awful lot of activities in the food, energy, water space. And while we don't expect those communities to come together completely, we find that the Midwest Hub will be significant in helping to bridge those communities, especially where big data, data science, and computational approaches will be fruitful for addressing problems across them. So we have 7 Spoke Awards and planning grants as part of our hub. Each of the hubs had others. The funds don't come into the hub. The funds go to PIs at these universities you can see listed here. And we also have an eager in the citizen science space. They're collecting air pollution data. But I will say that here is the one that I'm going to give another slide on in a moment, in digital agriculture. Building the community of unmanned aerial systems, plant sciences, and education. So the plant sciences is specifically interested in phenomics, this particular group, and education in the ag space, the digital ag space. Education because we've got a workforce development gap globally, both regionally but also globally in agriculture. And I like this morning, we'll move away from potentially big data ag or digital ag. I think it's all agriculture now, and we have to figure out how to bring along those communities that are less computationally oriented or data oriented to be able to be part of the movement that's happening and benefit from the data and applications that are becoming more easily available. So here are the other awards that we have. I'm happy to talk about them. They may or may not be of interest in this room, but certainly they fit at KDD in general. And so we've got data quality across sensors, so it's important for IoT and all kinds of applications. Also, we've got materials, computational neuroscience, and again, this one here fits into this evolving data-enabled community resilience program we've got working. So just quickly, a couple of pieces on this digital agriculture funded award. Essentially, they're working on automating the data workflows from unmanned aerial systems and harmonizing those data. And they're collecting data from different scales of analysis and geospatial scales, as well as trying to integrate that with farm-based crop and soil data, as well as potentially some localized weather data. But also thinking about big data in terms of phenomics and genomics. So G2P is a very important genomics to phenomics is a very important program at the National Science Foundation and at USDA. And so understanding how to build out the community around G2P and big data approaches for that is very fundamental. So this links actually applied sciences with some of the fundamental agriculture sciences and plant sciences being funded by the federal government. These are some activities they're doing. I won't spend much time here, but in addition to the research pieces they're doing, a lot of the work is funded to support development of network and community engagement. And so the first Spoke Awards were in general to help build out the community across the hubs. I will spend only 2 more minutes here. In addition to the workshop that we helped support from last year's KDD Food, Energy, Water meeting, we funded another Farm to Fork meeting that happened in Illinois last fall, which really looked across the entire production chain in agri-food. And we built on that particular meeting to bring together the food, energy, water community in the Midwest and the ag community in the Midwest and put on machine learning farm to table. This is just a very brief overview of what we did. Essentially, the meeting was open in the morning to the public, and we live streamed it. But then we had closed meetings in the afternoon to help us move toward developing some grant proposals and other things, including that we will very soon release a white paper that was requested by USDA NIFA, which is the extramural funding arm in the U.S. for agriculture. And so they've asked us to put something together about potential opportunities in the big data space for the funding agency. And we've had a pretty big call to run this meeting again. And so it's something that's in our long-range planning, but I think we will do that and broaden that out. So it'll be an open meeting. We'll bring in people from across the U.S. And I neglected to mention that we also had funded from NIFA to put together for them and help run a national big data in agriculture summit that happened a year ago, October. So we're in this space. We're happy to talk more about it, but I think it's really important. As I said, we're starting now to help build relationships across the food, energy, water space and the ag space, in part because in the U.S., the researchers in academia are funded by different programs between agriculture and food, energy, water. And because of those separate programs, we see a lot of disjoint kinds of activities happening. So we'd like to really help bring that together. So some opportunities to engage. My slides will be available. I'm here through tomorrow. I'm happy to talk with anyone about any of these spaces. But we will have a meeting next spring. Data methods, tools, and services will happen on the Illinois campus. So we welcome participation in that. This will be about cyber infrastructure and computational tools writ large. Mainly it's the tools folks, but we will be looking for applications. So happy to talk with any of you about that. And then I just want to mention that we are starting this year. We're launching corporate roundtables in a couple different spaces. And we'll be looking for academic and industry partners for those, and happy to talk more about that. So I'll leave it on this slide. Thank you. We've got our connectivity here, but if you go online, you can find how to reach us here. These are some activities that are coming up this fall. I thank you very much for being here. I look forward to talking with you throughout the day, and can talk about any kinds of ways to get involved. Thanks.
Thank you.